At the Garden of Eden in suburban Minneapolis, a grave is being prepared. The cemetery is one of 2 resting spaces for the Twin Cities Muslim community. Among the 200 burial plots is the unmarked grave of Shirwa Ahmed, a 27-year-old Minneapolis resident and Somali refugee who died in 2008. FBI officials returned his remains after he set off a suicide bomb in Somalia as part of coordinated terrorist attacks.
A Twin Cities man believed to be a suicide bomber and a recruiter of terrorists.
News linking Somali Americans to terrorism back in their country of origin has been a staple in Minnesota and nationally. In the past few years, around 20 Minneapolis men are reported to have traveled to Somalia to support the insurgent group Al-Shabaab. But on-the-ground efforts are being made in Minnesota to make Somali youth stay put, and there seems to be some success, especially on the soccer field.
On your head, no, on your head.
A local charter school and a local nonprofit have offered the world sport as an anchor to a better life for Somali American students.
Let's go!
Buzz Lagos is Minnesota's most decorated soccer coach. 5 years ago, he took a job developing a soccer program at Higher Ground Academy, a St. Paul-based charter school that is predominantly Somali. Lagos says his players make the most of things with minimal resources. When he started, he says kids had to share shoes and other equipment. He still has to pick players up and drive them home for most games and practices.
Here we go, on our way to practice, let's go.
The part of the experience is the van ride. Just getting in the van with 15, 16 guys, their energy, their enthusiasm, the friendships you see, the good things that happen in that whole process of what we do.
Lagos says most of his players live with a single parent or an extended family member in some form of public housing. Mosques, community centers, and now soccer teams, he says, serve as their support system.
Keep them engaged in school, keep them engaged in the soccer that they're doing, keep them growing as normal teenage boys in a nice setting, and keep them away from the temptation to move into a setting where they might decide to join some radical Islamic group and become terrorists.
Minnesota's Somali population ranges in numbers from a low census estimate of around 30,000 to as many as 80,000, according to community leaders. The first Somalis began arriving to Minnesota in the early 1990s when civil war broke out. Abdirahman Mukhtar is the youth coordinator at the Brian Quill Community Center in Minneapolis' Cedar Riverside neighborhood. He says some of the local men who returned to Somalia were people he knew. Mukhtar says he thinks some common issues related to new immigrant groups are to blame.
We have young adults who are 19 to 25 years old who also live in the neighborhood, who don't have jobs. Maybe some of them drop out high school and some of them are in college, but they don't have any other place to go.
I think they don't engage the youth, particularly Somali youth. Somebody has to engage them in a negative way.
John Paul Begirendavyi is the director of Thunder Plus, a Minnesota nonprofit using soccer as a leadership tool for local immigrant youth, the majority of whom are Somali. He's convinced Somali kids are getting recruited to go back to Somalia. He's also convinced soccer and other youth outreach programs can win the battle for their attention. He's met with Homeland Security and others to discuss creative strategies with Somali kids. Begirendavyi says the U.S. government should look no further than its own foreign policy for solutions.
This is, however, is the same thing they try to do in Afghanistan, in Iraq. You know, use the military and development opportunities, engagement of these communities. That's what we need to do here. Engage the youth.
One of John Paul Begirendavyi's former players is high school senior Abdurazak Ismail. Now a high school senior, he's being recruited to play soccer in college. Ismail says none of his Somali friends have ever talked about going back to East Africa.
I don't think a lot of kids want to be in a fight or in a civil war. I mean, they just want to hear, stay here, have a peace.
Ismail says he's had his share of growing pains in the U.S., but he says now the only way he'd ever think about heading back to Somalia is if they had a good national soccer team. But he says even then,
I would say no. I would say I want to play for America. But I think all Somalian people are are very thankful of America. They are, trust me, they are.
For Time Video, I'm Jesse Hardman in Minneapolis.